Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Assertive 400. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host. I also work on YouTube with the other channels Black Box Online Radio, as well as the Old Time TV Show, and a regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. In this episode, I wanted to talk all about assertiveness training, because there are different personality traits, right? In the Big Five model, there is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, represented by the acronym OCEAN. So, with agreeableness, you often find that it is very difficult to maintain relationships, particularly platonic friendships and business relationships or interacting with coworkers. And Dr. Jordan Peterson has talked a lot about the Big Five personality traits, and he said something that I thought was very odd when he said that agreeable people are very warm and compassionate, but they get taken advantage of. And at first I thought, wow, that's just so pessimistic, because Peterson even describes himself as an agreeable person. And I was like, is there some type of self-loathing undertone in there? But believe it or not, I think that he is somewhat correct about that. So then he says, if you're this agreeable person who's getting taken advantage of, the answer is assertiveness training. And it's something that's very common to be practiced by therapists. So I'm an extremely agreeable person, but I found that when I was reading about assertiveness training online, even just the stuff that I was reading yesterday or the day before yesterday, I never really thought that it was exactly getting to the heart of the issue, or I absolutely did not like the methods that they're telling people to do to become more assertive. For example, in almost all the articles that I read, and including that stuff from Jordan Peterson, he says, well, if you're an agreeable person and you feel like you're being taken advantage of, try saying no a little bit more. You can get that stuff in Psychology Today as well. That's their answer to being too agreeable. Try saying no a little bit more. But what I think is heavily missing from that discussion is that if you're agreeable and you're in a conflict that you didn't anticipate, then you just go blank. And then you just go along with whatever the other person wanted you to do. You can't just say no for something that you didn't account for. Now, I was actually just watching a video about the military, something completely unrelated to psychology, and the host of that program said that there is this training in the military to always have a backup plan, or always have a plan of counter operation, that if something goes wrong, then you need to immediately respond. But I definitely don't think that that is completely ingrained in our nature. It's definitely, absolutely not in our educational system. So how can you get to that level? And again, only because I found that most of the articles and sources that were talking about assertiveness training were just sort of like, all right, well, just do it. I wanted to say some things that I thought were rather insightful that I've gathered from some sources over the years, and I'm presenting this not as a psychologist. I'm not a life coach. I'm not even giving advice. These are just some things that I read that I thought were interesting that I would want to share with you. The first one is to think of a very assertive person. And what did this assertive person do when you were interacting with them? Or even better, if you were an observer of this assertive person, just kind of like, you can write this down on a notepad or make mental notes if you're a more mentally organized person. How did they handle a conflict? Like if someone just came up to them and said something nasty, how did they respond to it? Think of the interaction, write down all of the details, and use that as a model. And that's just like a learning experience, that if you get into a similar situation, then you already have it in your mind, that you'll be somewhat aware of it. The second answer to this about how to become more assertive is something that I learned from Dr. Robert Glover, and I have an episode about him here on this channel, talking about his books, No More Mr. Nice Guy and Dating Essentials for Men, as well as the numerous interviews that he has done. I invite you to like and subscribe to AstroPsych 400. But Dr. Robert Glover said very clearly that to deal with assertiveness, he tells people 3 times a day, ask somebody to do something for you that you could do yourself. And the example that he gave is with your coworkers. Ask somebody to make photocopies for you. And I remember thinking about that. I was like, No way, I'm not that evil. But this is one that I genuinely do. I do it all the time, and even if it seems like it's a little bit awkward, I will ask somebody to do something for me that I could do myself. Even it's like, hey, could you hand me that bottle of water or something like that? Photocopies. I mean, the intention, though, for him is that he wants you to get used to being uncomfortable and handling the awkward situations, but at the same time, I guess I'm not even completely there yet. And the next one is from Scott Adams, who is the author of numerous books that tie into self-help. Loser Think was a particular one. Scott Adams is the cartoonist actually behind the Dilbert comic strips, as well as the host of Real Coffee. But he talks a lot about how people think and how people interact, because he does cartoons about um, making fun of the corporate environment. Then he learned a lot about human behavior. And this is one that he said on his show. Once a day, do something conventionally embarrassing on purpose. Again, it's the same thing. So it's all about training yourself not to not to care about what other people think about you. And I really just like it when someone has something that you can try, that you can put into action, and that you can comprehend, and then maybe it will work, maybe it won't. But for me, though, I really was also very surprised that when I was reading through numerous pieces of writing about psychology that they're talking about being assertive, not one of them addressed an issue that I even deal with to this day. That, say, for example, you're interacting with somebody, whether they're a friend or a coworker, absolutely anybody, and you just think that everything is fine, and you say something like the sky is blue or something like that, and then they just start shouting at you, and you go blank and go along with whatever they want. Like, how do you respond to that when people catch you off guard and try to take advantage of agreeable nature? And there really just wasn't a strong answer provided. So the only thing that I can think of, as someone who deals with that all the time and still doesn't have a good answer to that, is distance. That, I mean, if they're just someone who is considered a friend, maybe they're not a very good friend. And I mean, that's ultimately what happens with agreeable people, that they get taken advantage of, so they just stop interacting with other people. But nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. However, it definitely comes to the point, though, when you have to wonder what exactly is the role of the agreeable person. And so many times, though, now I think back to not only my own experiences, but also the other agreeable people whom I spent time with growing up and in college and so on. It's almost as if the agreeable person was just playing a role in the lives of other people, and because they are willing to go along with what someone else wants to do, the other person is just kind of using them to play a part. No, you're the supportive best friend, and you need to do what I say because I'm the one who's trying to do something, and I need you to be my second in command, except for the fact that you're not commanding anyone, and I'm going to throw you under the bus as soon as I get a chance so I can be with someone that is slightly more beneficial. So as you see, that I definitely have some issues with friendship, but that's good. That's good. You don't want to be friends with someone who is toxic. And I will never understand how that type of person is going to operate. I mean, maybe I can comprehend it verbally, but emotionally, absolutely not. The type of person that is going to keep somebody in their life just to dominate them. And this happens, absolutely. They just want to prove that they are the one in control. So they keep somebody around. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, wouldn't you rather spend time with people that you actually like? Or is just power your only objective? If so, dominating one person, that's a pretty pathetic way to try and maintain some type of power structure. So, with agreeable people, I think that the concept of assertiveness is something that tends to be very challenging for the following reason. It means that you're going to be experiencing an additional amount of conflict that most people try to avoid. But confronting conflict definitely is something that you have to deal with. And this is another thing that people don't understand. Like the people who say, don't worry about it. Well, they're saying don't worry about it because it's not a problem that is connected to them. It is something that you have to deal with. And I even knew somebody once who was one of those don't worry about it types. And then he was just telling the story once about, okay, well, with my first wife, I was getting divorced, and I couldn't just say, don't worry about it. I couldn't just let it go. I had to do something. That's it. That's it. The question that we're all looking for is, well, what do we do in those times? But as far as assertiveness training goes, there's a website called ABCT that has something out here that says assertiveness training is based on the principle that we all have the right to express our thoughts, feelings, and needs to others, as long as we do so in a respectful way. When we don't feel like we can express ourselves openly, we may become depressed, anxious, or angry, and our sense of self worth may suffer. Here's another big reason why I found it so frustrating to read about assertiveness online. Almost exclusively, they were conflating everything with self esteem. Self esteem and self worth. No, Self esteem does not exist. The ego does not exist. Because no one cares about that stuff. And you don't, whoever you are. I don't know who you are listening to this now. You don't care about that. What you would rather have is the solution. You want solutions. I want the solutions. About to answer those questions about how do you become more assertive? How do you stop letting people take advantage of you? How do you keep your guard up? How do you always have a mental counter operation going on? Who cares about self esteem? And I think a lot of it is also the frame in which someone may operate. This is discussed in the Iron Rules of Rollo Tomasi about how you're always operating within someone's frame. It's like if somebody is being very assertive and they're dominating another person, the dominant person has a frame around the subordinate person. Sometimes people use the term supply in narcissistic relationships. Well, how does that stuff happen? With agreeable people, it really turns into the whole House of Cards effect. For example, they spend months, maybe years, interacting with somebody whom they don't like very much. They're just being taken advantage of because of the other person's domineering personality, or maybe the person wasn't immediately rude or immediately unfriendly or immediately unfair, and then very slowly the behavior became more and more intense and more unfair. So they had to respond in some way to stop this type of rude and toxic behavior. Again, if it's with somebody who's like a friend or a coworker, you don't have to interact with that person. And I often find that that's the solution. And actually, if you just want to get right to the heart of the issue about how to become more assertive, starting over is usually a good step. And say, for example, you have somebody in your life who is just being very difficult. They're always being very demanding. And what this stuff says here at ABCT, they aren't letting you express yourself. I often find that it is just get rid of them and starting over. It definitely seems to be somewhat of a stronger effect. Yeah, it does happen frequently. However, another thing that Peterson advocates is create your own hierarchies. All right, so if this group isn't working out for you, you can try to find some other people who might want to interact with you for whatever desired purpose, whether it's friendship or something business related. You don't always have to stay with the same group of people. Because the lesson that I had to learn the hard way was that if somebody does not respect you, they will not listen to you. And again, I'm reading all this stuff online about how people are saying, all right, tell your partner what you need. Tell the person who's bothering you what you need. Make the clear boundaries. Tell them your expectations. Nope. If the person does not respect you, they will not listen to you. Maybe they'll even do it one time just to make you think you're in this type of false sense of security, and then they will consistently try to be mean. Or they'll try to take advantage of somebody's agreeable nature. And maybe you will not have any effect on them at all. They're just going to be like, no. And then they might catch you off guard at some other point and continue to do these types of destructive behaviors. And when it comes to respecting somebody's right to individuality, or as ABCT says here, rights to free expression, there's very little you can do to mend that type of trust. And Dr. Ramani, a psychologist who runs a YouTube channel here, also promotes one thing. If somebody is exhibiting narcissistic tendencies, you do not confront them because they will just turn it around on you. And that is so importantly true. For example, if you just go to the narcissist and you say, all right, you've been very mean to me. This is the way that it's going to be. I need you to do this for me. These are my expectations. These are my boundaries. They aren't going to listen to that. So I'm very disappointed with a lot of the literature that is out there because it's sort of just telling you, believe in yourself. You deserve to be treated well. Yeah, of course. You deserve to be treated well. How do you get other people to behave within your expectations? And as I said, starting over is very, very practical for that. And if you do it from the beginning about laying out the boundaries and talking about your expectations in a new group, whatever it is, then that can have some type of a beneficial effect. And even got to the point where about 2 years ago, I had this one coworker who just really didn't like me. I had no problem with him at all, and maybe even some of his reasons were justified, but his behavior became a little bit more and more problematic for me. So I just decided I'm not going to talk to him unless it's absolutely work related, even if he's just like waves high in the hall. It just and he's trying to stop and say a quick hello, I wouldn't do it. And it worked. I mean, it's just, unless it was work related, I didn't talk to him. So there definitely are ways that you can reduce interaction with people whom you don't need to interact with. But I believe when it comes to assertiveness training, a lot of people are thinking about someone that you do have to interact with. Maybe it's a significant other, or maybe it's somebody like a boss. And the examples that they always bring up in these assertiveness training websites are like your boss asks you to work on the weekend. Or they also had this one that came up very frequently. You get the wrong food order delivered to you in a restaurant. Like you're sitting in a restaurant, the server brings you the wrong thing. And would you say something? I think that most people would say something unless they didn't care about the food. I mean, let alone dietary issues. So I think that that's somewhat of a bad example. And those are easy. The restaurant thing is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to assertiveness training for the following reason. The server is paid to bring you things. There's a complete understanding that you are the customer, they are the server, the boundaries are drawn. He or she is not doing it for their health. They're doing it for money, and their performance is even evaluated on the money based on the tip system here in America. So with something like a coworker, and if you're both at the exact same level and you have the same job title and the same job description, that's when the catching off guard really happens. Or even worse with friendship or relationships, when the power structure isn't so clearly defined, that's when people try to catch you off guard. And, it's a cutthroat world. And I think that that is a lot of it, but this whole stuff about improving your self-esteem, it's not going to stop people from mistreating you. In any ways, though, an issue on that, though, that I thought about was reading about, well, what are the basic concepts of intimidation? And a lot of the websites out there were encouraging things like have better posture and try to stand up straight. And they also talked about getting in shape. And I think that there definitely is a certain value to getting in shape. I will give them that. I don't know if that'll make you more intimidating all the time, because there's always going to be somebody who is going to be more muscular than you are. But when it comes to agreeableness, 100%. Getting in shape, like in 2017, I made a New Year's resolution to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I did it. And just doing weightlifting in the morning and so on. And I found that it made me a lot more irritable, but I was definitely on edge and just talking back to people in ways that I had never done before. And some of it was perhaps even unethical, but that was the only thing that changed in my life, just going to the gym. So I absolutely think that that's a valuable thing to throw into the mix, as opposed to the those tasks that I said at the beginning about the 3 times a day ask somebody to do something for you that you can do yourself, or talking about the once a day do something conventionally embarrassing. And a final thing that I will add in this episode is there are the 4 governing components of brain chemistry, as laid out by Dr. Helen Fisher in The Anatomy of Love: dopamine, serotonin, estrogen, and testosterone. And even if I might be using some of my own interpretations in that, I think that people who are dopamine-centered are going to do things that fuel their own excitement. People who are serotonin-centered are going to do things that contribute to the collective well-being, the social awareness and intelligence. So if you are dopamine-centered, I think that a lot of us, as I am, have to just make the realization that we aren't always going to do things that benefit other people emotionally. Someone might just say something in a social gathering and people can be like, "What? That was awkward. Why did you say that? That was inappropriate." The reason why people say inappropriate things like that is because there is a dopamine surge from unconventional behavior. And again, I cite The Anatomy of Love for a lot of this, where people are going to do things that fuel their own excitement. So I think that sometimes you just have to recognize that your behavior is a little bit different, and you're going to be different. You might not always get along with a group of people, but you're allowed to do that, because the book The Dream of Mortal Life stated that it's a big question. How do you maintain your right to individuality and your responsibility to contribute to the collective well-being? It's almost just like a twisted balancing act. Right to individuality and contribute to the collective well-being, because you don't have to sacrifice your individuality, especially not for people that you don't like that much. So I think that one rather goes without saying. But what do you think at all about these assertiveness training points, and what do you think about the literature out there? Has there ever been anything that you've read online from any of the psychology publications that you thought was valuable? I definitely like the ones that were coming at this from a more masculine standpoint, like it wasn't that one, it wasn't Men's Health, but that it had a very similar name to that had a pretty good article on mostly about the points that were covered in No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. But I think that there really is something that is just a little bit lacking. At the same time, I highly recommend Psychology Today. I've had a pretty good experience watching Psych2Go videos. I don't think that I agree with everything they always say, but Psych2Go also has a magazine, which you can get from them. They have a big YouTube channel here, and I cited Dr. Jordan Peterson a lot. I cited Dr. Helen Fisher a lot, and that and stuff in The Anatomy of Love really was revolutionary for me. And of course, Scott Adams and his book Loser Think, and a lot of the writing of Scott Adams really gets into things like persuasion tactics, and it doesn't exactly deal with assertiveness, but we could just do a real quick rundown of the persuasion tactics. I have not heard him say this exactly, but I believe that a fair assessment of his stuff is persuasion. What is that? Be mean, make people laugh, make someone else look bad, and the honorary 4th component of persuasion is remain composure. Remain composed sounds a little bit about that. Maintain composure. How about that? Remain composed, maintain composure. Be mean, make people laugh, make someone else look bad, and maintain composure. And that is an effective way to communicate almost any type of message that you're trying to share with a group. So I think charisma ties in a lot to that, which not all people have. I'm not charismatic, and I'm not afraid to admit it. But also, why is it that people try to catch somebody off guard? Like that whole example that I said, you say the sky is blue and then somebody starts shouting. Why is that? It's because of sensitivity. I don't care what anybody else says, all these self-esteem, egoists. No. Sensitivity. Because they know that their words are going to have an impact on you. And this is true. Like, I had this coworker once who once just said something ridiculous or something to the effect of trans people are not human. It's like, what? I mean, okay, I mean, I get you don't like trans people. You're saying they're not human? Of course they're human. And he was just like, didn't even acknowledge that I was talking. He was insensitive to the words that I was saying. So it doesn't even matter what I said, or that I was disagreeing with him. And do you think I ever tried to talk to him about any type of idea again? No, because he's insensitive. So people can recognize this type of sensitivity in somebody. I had this friend once who was a former friend, I should say. I'm sure you're not too surprised. I had this former friend once who was really into dog psychology. He said it was his hobby, learning about the psychology of canines. And he found out that there are threatening and non-threatening characteristics in dogs, and that alpha dogs can give off the non-threatening characteristics because they're alphas. They know that dogs can come to them and they can fight back. They don't even bark because, again, they know that they can fight. And with humans, it is the absolute same thing. Threatening and non-threatening characteristics. So when people are trying to take advantage of someone else's agreeableness, it's because somebody is admitting characteristics that are non-threatening and they are sensitive to how other people act toward them. Whereas people who are insensitive and threatening are not going to get taken advantage of, because some people heavily just say that that's the answer to everything, physical violence. Last week on the channel, I was talking about John Sonmez, who is the host of Bulldog Mindset, and he said that exact same thing, that if people don't believe that you're capable of physical violence, they will not respect you. And this whole thing about, oh, you need self-esteem, you need to, feel your own ego or whatever crap that is, that's just what it is, it's crap. Yes, I mean, you should be able to defend yourself, but my criticism of John Sonmez is I think he's playing in too much of, you need to be a jerk, too, to combat the other jerks in the world. Jerk A plus jerk B equals you, the winner. No. You don't get to do bad things just because it's beneficial to your social life. I mean, so I think that, but there is some degree of truth to that people will not behave in an aggressive way towards you if they believe that you are capable of responding in a destructive way or retaliating in a defensive way, or if their words have no effect on you, it's just going to be that. They're not going to have any effect on you. And Sonmez as well posted something in one of the emails that he sent out in his newsletter that all that matters is what you think of you. That should tie into assertiveness, because it's just recognizing that even if someone is trying to embarrass you in public, all that matters is what you think of you. And how do you respond to that? Definitely start from the beginning. You can only set out the rules and boundaries from the beginning, and then you can start telling people what to do. The 3 times a day thing, the 1 time a day, so you're not afraid of embarrassment, and then make the list of the assertive qualities so you know what to do in certain situations. And also, surround yourself with good people. That was something else from Scott Adams, by the way. What's the problem in life? Other people. Surround yourself with good people. Biggest step out there. All right, that's all for me now. One more time, my name is Ned DeHaan. This is Assertive 400. And you can like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll talk to you guys in the future.